At the end of each scenario, take a pause, take out a notebook, pen down your thoughts or your immediate ideas around how would you have taken action in those scenarios, and what principles or what core competencies you'll be basing that on. And pen it down before looking at the next place. So this will be an interactive video where you pause, reflect, scroll back, and rewatch these videos again and again. This will help you deepen your understanding of the core competencies and the code of ethics. Are we ready to dive into the very first question? Well, the first question is this. A coach is working with a client whose coaching engagement is sponsored by the client's organization. During the coaching phase, the coach explained confidentiality, boundaries, and clarified that the client's conversations would remain private unless the client gave consent to share information. Several months into the engagement, the client shares during a session that they are experiencing ongoing conflict with their manager. The client describes feeling misunderstood and says they are seriously considering requesting a transfer to another department. The client asked the coach not to share this information with anyone at work. Later that week, the sponsor emails the coach and asks, "Can you share whether the coaching is helping improve the client's relationship with the manager?" What should the coach do? So take a moment right now, pause, think about the question itself. Which competency is at play here? What code of ethics is at play here? When you're done, let's look at the 4 possible options. 1. What is the best action in this case? A. Share a general update that the coaching is progressing well without mentioning the transfer consideration. B. Ask the sponsor what specific information they're hoping to achieve from the coach. C. Decline to respond to the responsor's email. Or D. Explain confidentiality or obligations and discuss with the client what, if any, they consent to share. A, B, C, or D. What is your best action in this case? Take a moment to pause. Like what I mentioned earlier, think about the core competencies and also think about the code of ethics and the values of coaching, the principles of coaching, the definition of coaching. Which one of this best aligns with those actions? Now, remember, when we answer these questions as well, it's not about how we would respond, but what is most aligned to the ICF standards of practice. Have you got your answer? Well, let's take a look at the answer here. The best answer is D. Explain confidentiality obligations and discuss with the client what, if any, they consent to share. Now, this is an alignment with confidentiality clauses that you do with your clients regarding disclosure, transparency, and in accordance to the code of ethics. Okay, so the best answer in this case will be D. What about, you may be thinking, why would D? What about the others? What about asking the sponsor what specific information they're hoping to achieve from the coach? What about declining? What about sharing an update? When we look at certain keywords here, for example, share a general update that the coach is progressing well without mentioning transfer consideration, we are losing the confidentiality, right? We are losing certain essence there. So when we look back at what the scenario was, think about the scenario again, right? So look at the scenario. It says that several months into the engagement, the client shares during a session that they are experiencing ongoing conflict. So there's a conflict that's happening. And the client describes feeling misunderstood and says they're seriously considering requesting a transfer to another department. So they're thinking of transferring to another different department. And the client asks the coach not to share this information with anyone. So now the coach is put in the place of conflict because the organization is the one sponsoring the client. But the client is also telling the client that, hey, please don't share this. What would you do? So this is where the gray zone happens. What is the best, most aligned action to it? Right? So think about this. The sponsor emails after that, and they're asking you to share. What would be the best option? So that's where we said, hey, we would go back to the obligations or the confidentiality clause that was agreed upon during the engagement or the onboarding process. In every onboarding process, to minimize any form of grayness or gray zone, it's always useful to establish what are the boundaries of confidentiality and also postulate potential situations that may arise that may require us to make adjustments accordingly. So in this case, when we think about this, it sounds like maybe for some of us, we feel that it's okay, just share because the sponsor is paying the money. For some of us, hey, no, 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 we have to draw a very hard line. You're not allowed to share anything. What is the best option? Well, the best option is we look back at the confidentiality obligations. What was stated, what was agreed upon, what was discussed. And in this case, when we look back at this, it's really important that when we sign the agreements with the organizations or in the tripartite, we are very clear about the various confidentiality clauses that the organization has instituted, and also explaining this to the clients so that they are also aware of what are the limits of confidentiality. Confidentiality is not confidentiality for everything. If the client tells you, said, hey, I'm conducting some insider trading, and you know it clearly violates the law or clearly violates certain organization regulations, those are very clear. There's certain, we are allowed to breach the confidentiality because those goes beyond the scope of confidentiality obligation. But in the areas where it's a little bit gray, where it's not really spoken well, we have to go back, discuss with the client, ensure consent, and invite the organization or the sponsor to speak directly to the client and have that engagement with them rather than through me, because I don't want to be found in the situation when I'm stuck in the middle, becoming a mail boy, transferring one information to the next. I want to have transparency, honesty, integrity, and professionalism. So when in doubt, I'm always invite the sponsors to go back to the client and hear from them directly. I think that would be the best way to approach any situation like this. Okay, so the best action, D. Now let's think, what would be the worst action? We talk about A, B, C, D. What would be the worst action? Think about the words. Share a general update, ask the sponsor, decline to respond. We have identified D as the best, so we are choosing between A, B, C. What would be your choice? Take a moment to pen down your thoughts in your journals. Okay, let's review the answer. Answer, it's A. Share a general update that the coaching is progressing well without mentioning the transfer consideration. Now, it's even though you shared about the coaching progress without mentioning transfer consideration, this is still without the client's consent. We have not gotten the consent. And also, even though A, it sounds a worse action, but it's also C, decline to respond to the sponsor's email. Now, a lot of us will say, hey, why not C? Isn't C also not a good action? Yes, C is not a good action. A is not a good action, but A has a underlying hidden intention. We're trying to show what's good. We're hiding everything else. So you think about this. D is a complete flat out no response from you as a coach to the sponsor. A, I'm picking and choosing what I want to tell to shape the narrative. Now, A would then be more infringing on the values of coaching, because now I'm not upholding honesty, I'm not upholding transparency, I'm not upholding a sense of following through to the professional standards of coaching, because I'm picking and choosing what I want to share, and the rest I'm deciding what not to share. So A versus C, even though C is declining outrightly everything, but A reveals a deeper issue along the lines of honesty and integrity with the coach. So when doing so, and we look back at this, right, the sponsor in this case was the one who paid you for the coaching engagement. And notice one of the keywords here. Say, during the contracting phase, the coach explained confidentiality boundaries and clarified that the client's conversations would remain private unless the client gave consent to share. So that is the clue. The clue was that we will remain private, everything will remain here unless the client gave consent to share. So when we look at the worst possible action, right, which one is kind of like going against that? So what's going against that? It's about the general update and also without mentioning transfer considerations, right? So even when those things happen because of the nature of this particular situation, the better option here, because there was an initial phase of contracting where the coach has explained confidentially boundaries, and this was already agreed upon by the organization. right? So notice in different contexts, it could be that the coach explained confidentially boundaries and highlighted certain cases where the coach would have to break the boundaries to update the organization, right? Because we don't have those information, we are only relying on the information that's presented here. And as such, the best possible choice that we can make in this situation would be a choice where we compare between answers A and C. And between A and C, we begin to see, hey, A sounds like a bad action. C sounds like not a great action. But between which one is worser, okay, worser would be A, because there will be a sense of hiding something from the sponsors and not giving full transparency with the client and the sponsors as well. Right. Okay, so this is how we kind of balance the kind of thinking through the different question sets. So especially when you're preparing for your PCC exam, think about this. Ask yourself, I said, which two are the worst? Which two are the best? Out of these two, which are worse? Not in accordance to me, but in accordance to what is most aligned to the ICF core values, ICF Code of Ethics, or ICF Core Competencies, and also looking at the context of that question. So sometimes when we look at these four answers, we straight away say, C, that has to be the worst answer. But when we think about, okay, is this upholding the ICF core values? Is this upholding the various standards? Then we begin to realize, wait a minute, not quite. There may be something deeper here. So as such, in this case, the worst possible action, I will go with C. Okay, so how did you do for this particular case? Were you able to get both questions correct, the best action and the worst action? What questions you had from those that we've just chat about? Were there any competencies that you felt, hey, I wasn't so clear about this? What I want you to do, because this video is an engaging video, I'll be looking at some of the comments as well. Post your thoughts in the comment section below. And I want to have a little discussion and with everyone here who's preparing for exam. Remember, the exam preparation is not about practicing hundreds and hundreds of different sample questions, but rather taking time to review your understanding of the competencies, thinking through the intention and also the reasons and also how you're going about all those different processes.